Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? Before we begin, I have a leave request for this section of the Committee of Supply. Our long-standing practice is for the opposition to sit at the committee table to the right hand of the chairperson. Because the minister is participating virtually this afternoon, I am asking if there is leave of the committee to waive this practice. This would make it much easier for the members of the opposition to see the screens that are situated in the room. Is it the will of the committee? Agreed and so ordered. This section of Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. As previously announced, as there is only one resolution, the discussion will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for bringing forward that leave request again. Thanks in advance to the Premier and to his staff for participating in the committee hearing today. I wanted to begin by asking about the Manitoban who passed away after an attempt was made to transport them out of province from an ICU here in Manitoba. I would like to begin by asking, when did the Premier learn of this incident?
The Honourable First Minister.
Just prior to leaving my office to go to question period, and asked staff to make sure they talk to the health minister to get me any information that might verify whether this was fact or rumor.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
And, what can the Premier share with us that he's aware of regarding this incident?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I think I learned more from the member's preamble than I had to that point, but then again, I'm not entirely sure if the preamble was based on fact or it was based, I know later on the member asked some questions about a CBC story. I don't know at this point, so I don't want to speak on the basis of speculation. I would rather get the facts. If a tragedy has happened here, I think we're all despondent about it. And I'd be very interested in getting the facts before I say too much more, and I hope the opposition leader would understand the logic of that.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Can the Premier undertake to provide us with an update when he has more information on that incident?
The Honourable First Minister.
I'd be happy to do that. I had a brief exchange with the health minister, and he's assured me that his officials are looking into this, and so I'd be happy to undertake to get information to the opposition leader and to all members. This is we're in the midst of dealing with human tragedy of an epic proportion here, and we want to make sure that we're communicating sensitively to the families involved and to all individuals involved at every opportunity, but I would share that information as soon as it's expeditious to get it, and where it's appropriate in conjunction, obviously, with the realities of the family being informed. I'm not sure of the timing of this. I don't really know much other than I've now skimmed the CBC story. I think there's Ian Fraze, I think was the journalist who posted it. But beyond that, I would, before I comment further, I'd want to know the facts of the case and have them verified.
The Leader of the Official Opposition. I just want to acknowledge the answer that the Premier provided there, and certainly do look forward to being able to find out more information. It is a very serious incident, we know that much, and so certainly additional information to help us understand what can be done to prevent a similar situation, I think, is very, very important. So this person was in the process of potentially being transferred out of province before they were destabilized. So to me, that brings to the forefront of my thinking the standard of care that is provided to these patients who are transported out of province. The last update I saw, 18 Manitobans. That number may have changed, I acknowledge, because I didn't have a chance to see the public health update prior to question period. And so I just wanted to ask about the standard of care provided to those patients while they are in transport. Can the Premier tell us what that standard of care is?
The Honourable First Minister, I had not recognized you yet, and I wasn't sure, I didn't see if your hand had gone up, so you've been speaking for the Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I would want to get the facts before I speak to anything here. I don't want to speculate. This allegedly involves the passing of a Manitoba citizen that would concern all of us. I want to get the facts. And so as far as I was just saying earlier there, and I'm sorry I spoke out of order there, Mr. Chair, but just to clarify for the member, the health minister, I believe his estimates right now would be equipped, I think, to get his staff to assist in getting any information on the transport question he just asked more readily than I can here. So just suggest, I'm sure the health minister would be able to assist on that one and get him that information.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Okay, so I'll take that answer for, I guess, what it is, and we'll ask something similar in the health estimates when we have an opportunity to do so. What is the Premier going to do now to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, so in respect of, I'm just waiting for the detailed information on some of the assets that Ottawa agreed to provide. The focus, I think, of the ask from public health through me to the Prime Minister was that these additional resources would be key to assisting us in, and I won't say eliminating, I can't say that because I don't know, no one knows where the case numbers and hospitalization numbers and ICU numbers are going to go at this point. We all hope that it's a flat and downward curve, but there's a lag, as the member well knows, on ICU need that tracks out after on the graph beyond the hospitalization numbers. We're seeing more and more people contracting COVID at younger ages, these variants. And so the ICU, and again, I don't pretend to be a medical expert. I count on our medical people to give advice to us and we act on it. But our medical men and women are telling us that we can expect a more sustained need for ICUs. That's why we've gone to doubling the ICU capacity, added staff, added training programs, redeployed, of course, from other areas, which does have a consequence, as the member knows, was alluded to yesterday by other physicians who have seen surgeries delayed, treatments delayed, beyond the normal delays, if there is such a thing as a normal delay. It seems our delays have become sort of acceptable in this country. Over the last 25 years, we've seen delays double, triple in many categories. we're all experiencing this gradually, so it's like we don't notice sometimes, I think. But the delays in service accessibility in Canada have grown significantly over the last number of years, in particular over the last 5 or 6 years, and now with the pandemic, that continues. So on back to the ask of Ottawa, which I've been waiting in that detail, but I will share it with committee members. And the progress I committed, I think, yesterday's meeting to share with you as those commitments by Ottawa are kept, to give you a progress report, and I look forward to doing that. But my understanding from the health officials was that this would reduce the need for out of province transfers to occur, because we'd be beefing up the resources we have within our province. We have, I'm told, adequate space, but it's the staffing related issues. We've got challenges throughout our HR category, if I can put it that way, not just in health, but in other areas as well, with increased illness. I'm pleased to report, with increased absence. People aren't taking more time off, certainly not in the health field. They're working, they're dedicated people, they deserve our respect and our admiration. But most certainly, they would like some help. And so I commit to the member to share with him and with our colleagues the additional information, not just on the ask, but the progress report thereon, as soon as I have it here. I hope that addresses what the member was asking.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I acknowledge the answer that was provided there, and certainly look forward to additional information as it comes in. I think there's a few dimensions here. The Premier has talked about the staffing issues. Some of that is going to be coming from Ottawa, and via Ottawa, I guess is more accurate to say, and that will help to provide more spaces to treat Manitoba ICU patients. We've already previously spoken to in this committee today to some of the standards of care around transportation, so we'll endeavor to get some answers, perhaps at the health committee or in other venues about that. But I also wonder whether that triage protocol that has been spoken about isn't relevant in this situation. And so will the Premier be examining those standards to guide these decisions about who it is safe to transport and potentially who it's not safe to transport as part of the follow-up on this incident?
The Honourable First Minister.
The issues around transport are very important. This is a unique situation. I'm not sure if it's totally unique. I don't have the historical knowledge going back decades in respect of, despite my age, going back decades in respect of transport issues around critically ill patients, but I'm sure that we are in a situation where this is at least modern day high. This is why we ask for resources from Ottawa to bolster. And I await the detailed numbers. Their staff's attempting to get those for me right now. But we acted well in advance of this with, as the member knows, putting out a call to retired RNs, identifying nurses that had critical care experience, redeploying. We deployed over 50 nurses from different service areas in our healthcare system, 2 ICUs, the critical care nurse orientation program that we started last year. We've had 130 nurses take that orientation program, so that we were anticipating and moving nurses into those capabilities well in advance. That started, I emphasize, that was over a year ago. That's not to be confused with the Accelerated Critical Care Nurse Orientation Program. That's a different program, and there's 77 nurses on that one. So between those two, over 200 nurses that received additional training, additional skills to allow them to get into the service area that we're now seeing is over the last several weeks posing incredible demands on our ICUs and on the staff there. And on the and then the further program we introduced just a few weeks ago is the Icu Orientation Program that we just reopened for, have 104 nurses that just have completed or are in that program as we speak. So again, you know, when you add it up, you're talking about 300 nurses that we've equipped to handle ICU tasks, which either were rusty because they had retired or have moved into that area from other areas of service, of nursing service. In terms of the skill mix and so on, I can't, if we had Lynette Siragusa here, she'd be able to give a more detailed, capable professional answer to the member, but I understand they're using skill mix teams to assist, and I'm probably using the wrong terminologies, but actually working in other professionals with pharmaceutical expertise, qualified pharmacists, in addition, physiotherapists, into the mix to give counsel and to work with patients as part of a team of caregivers. You know, we have added significant, as the member knows, we've added, I think I mentioned this briefly yesterday, added really significant space for ICUs. Of course, it's the staffing that's the key. Not much good, as Dr. Peachy said in his report, not really that good to have poorly equipped ERs with poorly equipped ICUs where people get moved out of them after they get checked into the hospital. That was what was happening previously. No fault of the opposition leader, but certainly of the previous NDP administration. After 16 years, that was a dramatic oversight on their part. So the fact is, we began that revamping and that cleanup immediately upon coming to government. The fact is that there were actually beds that weren't beds, but because they didn't have staff. So saying you have this, I noted the members saying that beds were down, not true, unless you count a bed without equipment and staff as a bed. ICU beds weren't available because they weren't fully staffed and equipped under the previous administration. So in baseline, we have more than doubled the number of ICU beds during this pandemic, but we've also added beds prior to that time. And it's important to note that. Added staff, critical care orientation training, nurse hires, as the member knows, significant to the casual pool, had 230 nurses as of May the 17th, so just a week ago. So there's approximately now in the casual pool over 750 nurses. So bolstered that staff. It's good we did. Thank goodness this pandemic didn't hit in 2016 because these preparatory actions wouldn't have been taken and we would be in an extreme period of vulnerability. We are anyway, but it's not nearly as bad as it would have been.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question was about the triage protocol and whether that will be, I don't want to say reviewed because, you know, we've never heard confirmation that triage protocol has been developed, but will the need for one be examined in light of this incident? Triage protocol, I guess, would help guide decisions in terms of who could be transported, who shouldn't be, different levels of care provided to them, and so on. Will the Premier re-examine that policy and the potential need for one in light of the current incident?
The Honourable First Minister.
Any aspects of doctors' decision-making processes can be directed to the Health Minister. I just wanted to give the member, is this the status right now? I undertook to give the member an update, members of the committee, on the federal supports. Just receiving that, I'll just share with the member the ask, and then I'll go to where everything is at. So the first ask, and this was relayed, officials had been in discussion, the member had asked about timing and so on. the formal ask from me as Premier to the Prime Minister what happened at last Thursday in the afternoon after question period, I believe. But the officials had been in dialogue prior to that time for a few days, a week. And so this was the ask, human resources for critical care. We asked for 50 trained critical care nurses, up to 20 respiratory therapists. And if they were not available as a fallback, anesthesiologists and or clinical assistants that could work on the airways breathing tasks in the ICUs. So the first point being the HR ask. I would note for the members of this committee that for 4 years in estimates, I asked questions not necessarily like this, but a variety of questions and got no answers from the previous NDP administration. So I hope for those who don't have the historical background to understand this, that they appreciate that the approach that I've taken with the opposition leader throughout our time together, working together, is to endeavor to, if I can't get the answer to him right away, I always endeavor to get the background for him and get back to him. I hope he'd agree. And I do make that point because that was not the collegial approach that was taken by the previous NDP administration ever. In respect of equipment, we wanted to access from the Public Health Agency of Canada stockpile, their strategic stockpile, equipment. And this gets into technical equipment. I can't tell the members much about it except to say that it involves some Centromeg and cardio health equipment, and that we would like more ECMO. I don't know what the acronym stands for. So again, ECMO. ECMO, you can find out. I'll get back to the member on what the acronym means. In terms of public health supports, in addition, it would be helpful, I communicated to the Prime Minister, it would be helpful to have 1 to 2 EPIs for a minimum of 3 months, depending on how COVID case counts continue in a number of areas. Local deployments and or added central support would be of great assistance to balance downtime for our existing staff. So we're very concerned about the stresses being put on our existing staff. We also have to make this point, and have made this point repeatedly, the Prime Minister, in specific reference to healthcare, the Canada Health Transfer, and in specific reference to the need for planning in respect of vaccine availability in Canada, that we need to think longer term as well. We're all caught up in the present right now for understandable reasons, but the reality is that COVID could be with us for a long time. And for example, right now, I and other premiers are very concerned that we don't seem to have a plan on vaccine procurement going forward beyond this current pandemic. For example, we don't have a strategy for how we're going to get boosters. The province has always looked after, flu shots and so on, as the members all know. It was never the federal government. Now we've got the federal government not allowing us to actually procure vaccines. So the federal government is in front of the provinces. The provinces aren't able to get orders from vaccine suppliers because the federal government has blocked our way. So how is that going to help us when it comes to booster shots going later in the year? We need to get clarification on that so the Prime Minister understands this to be an issue as well. This isn't a partisan shot. It's a reality that we have to address. We need a plan going forward for booster shots. We need a plan for additional domestic procurement to be enhanced. We're getting reports about vaccines not being available from Moderna in the coming weeks that we're planned for. We're talking about we can't rely on offshore suppliers. We've seen that time and time again during this pandemic. So we need to move forward. Got a couple other asks, but I see the chairman is waving at me, so I'll stop there and I'll give the members an update on what's come so far in a second, so they have that awareness.
The Honourable First Minister, time has expired. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I expect the Premier is probably going to continue on with some of those follow-up points that he was going on, but I would go ahead and pose my next question, and I'll probably just pose it a few times if necessary. So we know that prior to the publication of the incident today that The government had been providing some updates on when people were moved out of province from an ICU here to an ICU in a different location. Again, we've heard about predominantly Ontario locations, first Thunder Bay and then additional ones, North Bay, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, Ottawa, Windsor, etc. Some talk about potentially Saskatchewan being added to that list in the future. So today, unfortunately and very tragically, we're hearing about an attempt, not the actual transportation of somebody to an ICU, but the attempt to transport somebody to an ICU out of province. So will the Premier commit that the government will update the public on other such attempts so that we can have a clear picture of what is going on with healthcare as we deal with this third wave?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I'll say to the member that I understand there are procedures and they are standard procedures that are followed in the case of fatality of anyone involved in our healthcare system. It involves certain procedures that must be followed. I think out of respect, obviously, for the immediate family, the notification issues and so on, and there's a protocol. I don't have it here. But I believe it would be written down somewhere, and I would undertake for the member, I'll see if I can track it down for him, and he can review that. And then if he has any suggestions on how that can be improved or modified in some way, that'd be good. I want to say to him, though, pretty harsh in question period today. I'm trying to answer his questions as best I can as he phrases them, and I think when he reviews answers, he might, on reflection, recognize that I answered them honestly. And so the accusations that he launched into, I understand, come from being angry and frustrated, as we all are, but I don't think they're justified. The member raised an issue today. I attempted to address it as best with the information I have about somebody dying, and that's a pretty important thing. So I just want the member to know that I hope he would agree. I've tried always to be forthright in responding to him in terms of facts and not evaded them. And I would never do that. And I hope the member would understand that. So on the issue of the public health supports, I'd just say we did also, I think I mentioned this briefly yesterday, but we did ask for additional help from Stats Can on the case and contact management issue. Mentioned specifically 50 personnel if we could get them. That represents over and above what we have. I'm going to go approximately here, I think about 5% addition to what we have involved now in Manitoba in contact tracing. So it's not big, but it's not small. But it is important because the case management, the contact tracing is a really important aspect of how we keep a handle on COVID, and the contact information, as I referenced yesterday, is critical to get it. It is critical that people share it. Because if they're out there associating with others in violation of health orders, they need to share the information so we can help those other people to get tested quickly, not delay. That can lead to an escalation number of cases. So the public health nurse support we had asked for potentially, alternate isolation accommodation personnel. This one's big. We get folks living in environments in Manitoba, as are people living all across the country, in environments where once they're told to isolate, they can't. It's very, very difficult for them because they're living in close quarters or they're living in a small accommodation with other people in the hallway and are all around them. So we've established a program of alternate accommodations for helping people to isolate. To support that second site, we had hoped to get some additional personnel to assist us with that as well. Because we had, well, anyway, we can get more detail on that one too if the member's interested. Just to give you the status on where we're at, It appears discussions are still in progress on the 12 ICU nurses. We think we'll have 12 ICU nurses mobilized over this week, the week we're in. So I'll give update as soon as I can confirm. In fact, I can do it in question period tomorrow. If I can get the data, I'll share it with all members because I think this is critical. None of us wants to see Manitobans have to be transported out, and with these asks being identified, and I want to say a special thank you to the federal government for accommodating this. I want to say to our Regional Minister, Jim Carr, thank you very much for your support and efforts on this. These are much appreciated. Number of ICU nurses could increase, the ask could increase depending on how things look in other provinces. As the curve is bending down in other provinces, we may be able to also obtain the support of other qualified ICU nurses from our partners in the Confederation. That's how family should work. And we'd be perfectly willing to help others if the shoe was on the other foot. So I don't feel bad asking for help from Saskatchewan or Ontario for any number of issues. And that's one of them. Advanced care paramedics, we don't know yet. On the StatsCan staff, we believe that has been confirmed, but I am not sure when they will start doing contact tracing, so I'll attempt to get detail on that. We got 3 ECMO machines, and again, I apologize to members of the committee for not knowing what ECMO means right
Honourable
now.
First Minister's time has expired. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, you know, I do note what the Premier is saying, and we'll look forward to the update in question period. I just wanted to pick up just a small detail in his answer there. He mentioned a 5% increase in contact tracing, and you know, I think I just totally missed the exact number that was going on there. So could the Premier just walk me through what's the number of contact tracers that has been requested, and then what is the total number here in Manitoba? If you could just provide that answer, just because I caught the 5% figure, I didn't catch the other figure in terms of that explanation. So if the Premier could just walk the committee through those numbers in terms of the request, how many were requested additional, and then that goes on top of a number of how many contact tracers.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, happy to provide that. And I was wrong. I think I said 4%. I think it's closer to 6. 847 is the number of agents we have currently working on contact traces through StatsCan, Red Cross, 24/7 In Touch, and our provincial recruitment deployment team. So you got 847. We asked for 50, so you can do the math. That would get us up to around 900. So 50 of 900, there you go. Closer to 6%, 5.7 or whatever. In addition, I have the answer to the question you've all been wanting to ask. What the heck does ECMO stand for? Extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. This is essentially, I guess I'll use a layman's term, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting this, but I think this is essentially what we think of perhaps as an iron lung, a device that breathes outside of your body into you when you can't. So it's this is an invasive technique that allows people to continue to live and maintain appropriate levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide when use of ventilators are not sufficient. So this is the backup device. So we asked for help with that. We asked for 3. What does AIA stand for? Alternative. Previously mentioned, sorry, I previously mentioned the alternate isolation sites. We asked for some personnel there and 1 or 2 epidemiologists, additional support for communities, to lessen reliance on RHA public health nurses who we've been deploying to communities. So backup staff, equipment of various kinds. I look forward to getting an update, and I can share that with members. I hope tomorrow, depending on when the data is forthcoming. So yeah, I mean, I thank the federal government on this. I thank also our provincial partners. We clearly we were in a great position a month ago, we're in an awful position now, and we all hope that we're in a great position a month from now. I mean, that's the summation. But right now, we need the help of our partners in the Confederation. And Manitoba's always been the first to offer help to others. And so now I guess we're necessarily cashing a few chips here to get some help from others. Ottawa has been forthcoming, and I thank them for that. I thank the Prime Minister in advance for satisfying these asks. This is not a guarantee that we don't have to transport people. We can't say that, but it's clearly an effort to make adjustments to our staffing levels and equipment levels so that that is a less likely possibility as we move forward.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I thank the Premier for that answer there. On 847 agents currently here, he mentioned a few agencies, StatsCan, Red Cross. I'm guessing like 24/7 In Touch is probably another one. I don't know if there's others in there. Can the Premier just break that figure down? Like, is it, by each agency, is it 100 StatsCan, this many Red Cross, so on and so forth? Can the Premier break down that 847 agents currently working and which organization or company they work for? Thanks.
The Honourable First Minister.
I should be clear in giving the member this information that I do not have in front of me right now the number of contact tracers working with each of the RHAs. That's in addition to this, right? So I'll undertake to get that as well because that bolsters this number. It's higher than the 847. 24/7 In Touch, 466. Canadian Red Cross, 63. StatsCan, 175. Our provincial recruitment redeployment team, 143, grand total 847. But I would emphasize some of those. These are the partner agencies. So these agencies are working with the RHA's internal personnel that are already working here. So I'll get the detailed number on the RHA contact tracing for the members. So we'll have a grand total. And I would emphasize some of these may be just in the process of training up. So they're maybe at various levels because we've bolstered the numbers. So I don't want to create the impression every single one of these people right now is doing contact tracing because there may be some that were just hired 2 weeks ago and they're just in a training program. Hope that's helpful.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, I do thank the Premier for that breakdown there, and I take seriously that he mentioned that the RHAs do employ their own resources in the space. So, can the Premier undertake just to provide that once they can dig that up?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I will undertake to do that for sure. And I'll just share with the members, this was a real challenge early on. I think some of the members will remember early days with contact tracing. This is a new experience for a lot of people. We had to bolster. There had never been a demand like this put on our internal staff. And so this is where the outsourcing to get additional help. Initially, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know that the Red Cross pitched in fairly early in the second wave and added to our number. You guys might be able to give me the date on that if you could, on when the Red Cross came in to assist on contact. If I recall, I'm thinking it was early November. They kicked in with a few people. We'll get the detail on that for you. But at that point in time, the issues around both testing and the contact tracing were under really strong demand. We developed a balanced scorecard, which I can share with the members if I can get a copy of it, to illustrate how to monitor the situation internally more effectively. on an ongoing basis to make sure that we were addressing problem areas before they became a problem as much as possible. Basically, kind of a red, green, yellow concept where if it's in the acceptable parameters, good. But if it's slipping into the yellow, then you look to bolster with changes in either additional personnel or technical approaches that may assist to move it back into green. And then when it's red, even more of a focus is required. But for the most part, that once that scorecard system was set up, our VAX team, our health team has been able to monitor every aspect of the service provision that they've done and to maintain amazing services. I'll ask my staff to pull up the number of tests, number of contact tracing interviews and so on and so forth, if they can pull that up and share with you. And I think it'll impress members of the committee if we can get those numbers pulled together. Red Cross started right at the end of October, so I wasn't far off on the start of November. So we could pull up those numbers for the committee members. I think that'd be interesting. On the matrix then, just to talk about that for a sec, on the contact tracing, virtual call center staffing, just to share with you the targets, first of all, for COVID-19 contact tracing are 80% of cases reached in 24 hours, 80% of contacts reached in 24 hours, and total active cases that last longer than 4 weeks to be 0. In other words, to clear that case off. COVID-19 contact tracing 7-day average, just to share that against the metric from this ends as of Monday of this week for the previous week the target was 80% reached in 24 hours. And remember, these contact tracers are working their tail off. So when I say they shot for 80%, they got 74% reached in 24 hours. They're not failing. They're facing the biggest challenge on contact tracing we've ever faced as people, ever in the history of the province. And these guys are working really, really hard across the board. But we saw this slipping into the yellow, realized we needed more people. That hence the ask to Ottawa for additional contact tracing support to get that up. Because the faster we can get those contacts, that information, and the faster we can notify people that they need to go and get tested, for example, the better. However, their matrix for cases contact traced within 48 hours is 94%, very good. So again, they're working hard. That was on the COVID-19 contact tracing. The 7-day averages are in green. We're okay, but they were starting to slide. And so hence the need for additional staff. As we saw the contact tracing demand rise with the number of cases clearly. I won't get it, there's probably too much detail here. The committee members might not be interested. It's here though, if anybody is interested. We have that information available if you'd like it.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, I would, if whether it could be tabled or whether it can be just provided as an undertaking or something like that. Definitely would. And if the Premier could just repeat, sorry, just the pen doesn't move as fast as it might. Was that 94% within 48 hours? If you could just run through that again too, and then just either if you can table that or share it as an undertaking.
The Honourable First Minister.
So, since we just got confirmation from Ottawa that we're getting 50 contact tracers, yahoo. So committee members are right here on the cutting edge of information dissemination. So they're coming in for orientation apparently June 1st and 3rd. And that's for 50 additional contact tracers. And there's the number of contact tracers in the RHAs is 70. Just to clarify that one for the opposition leader. So it was 847 with the partner agencies, plus 70 within the RHAs, to give you a grand total there of 917, plus an additional 50. We're getting up to 967 of just contact tracers. I just shared them, I'll say to the member, I think we'd be I think you'd be interested to know, and we get these numbers are updated, how frequent? These numbers are updated daily. The numbers I have right in front of me here were in anticipation of them asking about this yesterday, so they're old. So I'll get them the newest numbers, and I'll hand them to them tomorrow before question period. How's that?
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
My mic was off, so you probably didn't hear me laughing in surprise there, but in a good-natured way, Mr. Chair. So I do appreciate that additional late-breaking info in terms of the 50 contact tracers just confirmed. That does sound like news you can use, to use a term from my previous line of work. I was just wondering, while we're on that subject, is there any additional update? Like, did that news come along with anything else? Was there any additional info on the respiratory therapists or the critical care nurses or other elements of federal assistance coming to Manitoba? I just wonder if the Premier has anything else he can share along with the contact tracer number.
The Honourable First Minister.
No, but as soon as I have anything, I'll be letting them know.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Okay, well, I certainly look forward to some of these follow-up conversations on the health topic. It's top of mind for everyone in Manitoba these days, whether we need those healthcare services right away or whether we're just, waiting for that vaccine eligibility. But I do, recognizing, the clock is ticking, I do want to spend a bit of time discussing Manitoba Hydro. Just as a starting point, there was a big jump from year to year in terms of, I guess, projected profit for next year relative to the profit that Hydro is on track to make this year. So on track for $111 million and forecasting $190 for 21-22. Oh, sorry, I guess I should just rephrase that all. It was $111 million for the past year, and then on forecasting on track for $190 million in the current fiscal year. So I'm just wondering, can the Premier explain where the increase from the originally anticipated amounts came from?
The Honourable First Minister.
Now, I'm not imputing motives here, but I understand Crown Corp's is in estimates right now. So probably the best bet is to ask the minister in charge of Hydro to get the detail on why the projections are looking rosier than they were a while ago, rather than asking me and catching me saying something that somehow is confusing to the member. I'd only say this, let's put this in perspective. Because of the massive overbuild at Hydro with kiosk and bipole, the debt of Hydro grew exponentially, is now in the area of $23 billion. And even with the discounted interest borrowing charges that Hydro gets by being able to piggyback on the provincial credit rating, which we've shored up through prudent fiscal management over the last half decade, the debt service costs are in the area of $1 billion a year. That's just the hydro debt. So I know the member was getting excited the other day there about a profit potential of 190 million, and it sounds great, or 111 or whatever. Sounds really good, except when you consider that even at 190, it's not even a fifth of the interest charges on hydro's debt. So at this rate, hydro is going to be in debt for a long time, to put it mildly.
The leader of the official opposition.
So the Premier put forward the Wall report earlier this year. It was pretty significant that among the recommendations, which the Premier did commit to, was to sell off so-called non-core assets. Just wondering if the Premier can clarify what the non-core assets are, and what does that term mean, non-core?
The Honourable First Minister. The Honourable First Minister, we could not hear you. I don't know if you're muted there, or the Honourable First Minister.
Thank you. I'm on? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, the Wall report points out some serious challenges that have occurred as a consequence of some of the processes around the construction of the Kiosk and Bipole West line, such as the $1.2 billion that was spent by the previous administration to proceed with Kiosk prior to approvals by the PUB, and meant that of course, because you're spending $1.2 billion before it's been approved, that's probably something that we should look at. And that is something we're looking at with our legislative agenda to strengthen the PUB, something which I believe it would be fair to say former Premier Greg Selinger now understands is a great idea because he was there at the time when this was getting out of control. There are many people at Hydro that didn't view Kiosk as needed, not in the near term in any case, yet, and many who also viewed it as speculative and more of a roll the dice situation for Manitobans than it was core to the responsibilities that Manitoba Hydro traditionally has emphasized of providing lower cost power to Manitobans. In other words, built for Americans to be paid for by Manitoba children is essentially, I suppose, the challenge here. So it's the pre-approval of spending makes it, without any kind of objectively staged accountability, makes it very difficult to hold the government of that day accountable for the decisions, and makes the decision to get into merchant dam construction by Manitoba Hydro officials of the day something that they were not held accountable to at the time. So this is why proceeding with a strengthening of the Public Utilities Board so they get full data, full information, not partial or misleading information, is very important. It appears that the hydro officials were blinkered by a bias that the government had early days to get this built and get it done. Confirmation bias, it can be called, that they were essentially told, go ahead and build Bipole on the west side, regardless of facts to the contrary that hydro officials tried to present to them, regardless of objections by their own board appointees on hydro board, and that they proceeded with Kiosk without regard to the declining revenue potential generation ability that it had vis-a-vis competition in Bakken and various other markets to the south of us. So in other words, no off-ramp was considered. So this is the problem that we face now and future generations will face. We're going to be extremely power heavy for the next number of years, if not decades, as a consequence of these investments. The implications are very real. The implications to Manitoba's finances were real when it was happening. We were getting warned by credit rating agencies. The previous administration was warned that structural deficits growing in size in good times wasn't a good thing. Yet they didn't seem to consider that at the cabinet table. According to the Wall report, there weren't discussions, according to his interviews with senior officials, there weren't discussions at Treasury Board or at the cabinet table for a decade on this project. And that is hard to accept and hard to understand given the risks that that would pose to the provincial finances more generally. You're dealing with credit rating agencies who absolutely understand the risks associated with the debt at Manitoba Hydro in the context of the risks associated with the government of Manitoba. They're not two separate things. They don't treat them that way. And so to not consider the ramifications of a hydro debt that was escalating to double and almost triple its size just a few years earlier is really unbelievable. So the member asked about privatization. I see my time's up, but I'll certainly go into that topic. The member would like subsequent to this response.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I just want to acknowledge the Premier saying that selling off non-core assets is privatization at the very, very end of his answer there. Can the Premier tell us when that, the $5 billion in energy sales to Saskatchewan, when was that finalized?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, two things. One, the member has the Crown Corp minister in estimates as we speak, so if he wants any detail on timing on announcements, he can certainly get it there. In respect of, I've already made it clear to him that the debt at Manitoba Hydro is in excess of $23 billion, $1 billion of debt service costs. And if he wants to describe that as great news, he can, but it's not good news for ratepayers at Manitoba Hydro for the next 30 or 40 years for sure. As far as the, obviously was speaking facetiously in reference to the privatization. Every time we say hydro, the Pavlovian response from the Leader of the Opposition is to talk about privatization, so I thought I'd beat him to it. The fact of the matter is that Manitoba Hydro has developed their board, their management, is shaping a long-term strategy to get them back to the fundamentals of looking after Manitobans first and not necessarily people in Wisconsin or Minnesota. And so their plan as a management and as a board is to move forward to coordinate their policies, their governance, their regulations to mitigate risks and leverage opportunities. This is the opposite of what happened under the NDP, where they actually leveraged risks and mitigated opportunities. In other words, they took hydro down the interstate to the United States in a big orange bus and decided they wouldn't take an off-ramp even after all indications of the dangers of the trip were presented to them. They avoided confronting the reality of the situation by not discussing it at Cabinet or Treasury Board. They decided that they wouldn't present the full information to the Clean Environment Commission on BIPOL, and they excluded BIPOL from consideration of the needs for and alternatives to analysis of the Public Utilities Board, so it couldn't even be looked at. They ignored, and this is the previous administration. Now, no member, except perhaps with the exception of the member for Elmwood, needs to take this personally, but the fact of the matter is that the NDP caucus wasn't elected at this point in time. They need to understand they don't need to own these decisions, and choosing to do so, I think, is a mistake, but it's their call. I can only tell them that ignoring the realities of the situation at Treasury Board is unbelievable, and it is clear that that is what happened, that ignoring these decisions at Cabinet and in Cabinet discussions is also extremely dangerous, and that is also what happened. And that then pushing through with over $1 billion of investment without getting approval from the Public Utilities Board is frankly disrespectful. But the position of the hydro leadership at that time was apparently not listened to. Many people in senior management, according to the Wall report, were questioning the value of the kiosk investment. The board themselves questioned why the hydro line, the bipole 3 line, would go on the west side. And there's never been a fulsome explanation by former political people of the government of that time as to why those decisions were pushed forward over and above the recommendations of their own board and their own senior executives. So what you've got now is a thing called Strategy 2040, which Hydro has developed. It is a 20-year outlook with a strategic direction focused on Manitobans. I emphasize not Minnesotans, but Manitobans. There are 5 key components to the strategy that articulate Hydro's commitment to their customers. 1, to provide safe, reliable energy that meets the evolving energy needs of Manitobans. 2, to serve customers efficiently, responsibly, and digitally. 3, to help all Manitobans efficiently navigate the evolving energy landscape. 4, to maximize the benefit of Manitoba's clean energy advantage. And 5, to keep costs as low as possible while making the investments necessary to serve Manitobans. This implementation is underway. It includes realigning roles and responsibilities, but no change to overall staffing at Hydro. There's a quick Coles notes for the member. I think I'm running out of time on this one.
The leader of the official opposition.
Is there a new export contract with XL Energy over and above what's previously been made public?
The Honourable First Minister.
Perfect question to ask the minister, who's in estimates as we speak.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Just a couple different consultation questions I guess I have first. In regards to the framework that was being developed for First Nation consultation policy, I'm wondering if the First Minister can notify the committee as to where that's at.
The Honourable First Minister.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. If the member wouldn't mind repeating that, that'd be helpful.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Just in regards to the First Nation consultation policy that was being developed for a couple of years now, and my understanding is that the framework was already imminent more than a year ago, and I'm just wondering if the Premier can update as to exactly where that consultation policy is at and when will it be made public.
The Honourable First Minister.
I just encourage the member to direct those questions right to the minister. I'm sure he'll be helpful in getting an update that would be more fulsome than I can. I'll only reiterate to the member that I do take very seriously the responsibilities of consultation with the Indigenous peoples of our province in respect of hydro projects and other projects as well. The member earlier, the member had asked about hydro purchase agreements and so on. I can only say that the announcements on these deals were made in consultation with the hydro leadership, and they were announced. So when I think the member had said, I think he was repeating a column in one of the daily papers that supplies him with much of his fodder for, I think, question period about not revealing publicly the nature of the specifics of the deal. So there was somehow, and it was implied this was a cover-up on how great Hydro was doing. Actually, the announcements were made public. They were press released. They were made in conjunction with the federal government. And I can only say they were done in conjunction with Hydro to a standard that they recommended we follow on announcing hydro deals. So January 16, Hydro and SAS Power signed a power purchase. Can I get a glass of water? 20 to 40, 100 milliwatt agreement requiring construction of a line to Saskatchewan. I wanted to be specific about that because we have an ISIP infrastructure.
Investing in
It's investing in Canada fund, but ISIP, what's the acronym?
investing in Canada infrastructure plan.
No, well, that's fine, except what's the ISIP? Where did the S come from? Investing in Canada infrastructure program. Okay, we're back now. So we got our infrastructure asks are in. They've been in for months now. The ISIP program is a partnership with the federal government. We're excited about it. One of the projects that we want to see move ahead on is an east-west line called the Berto transmission line. The member for Rupert's Land might be familiar with this one, kind of an exciting project. But this project would then facilitate the transfer of power converted here near Winnipeg and moving into Saskatchewan to get them off their other sources of power that we think ours are better than theirs. We think our football team is better than theirs. We think our power is better than theirs too.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Just for a point of clarity, I am the member for Kiiwetinoong, not the member for Rupert's Land, which was the old name of the riding way back when perhaps the Premier was last traveled up north. But getting back to the initial question, it was about the consultation policy, and it has been quite some time, of course, with the pandemic going on. There was no ability to have the Indigenous Relations Minister answer the questions and estimates. So I can still go back to the initial estimates of 2 years ago now, where she had spoken about development of the consultation policy with First Nation communities and the framework that was now becoming imminent. And when she was questioned on exactly when that would be, she had mentioned that it would still have to be signed off and rubber stamped by the Premier. So again, I asked the Premier exactly where is that at within your department and within your office. As I mentioned, the Minister had mentioned that in fact has to be cleared and done through your office. So I'm just wondering where that's at.
The Honourable First Minister.
I just want to assure the member that I've been in Northern Manitoba many times, but not when the travel restrictions are in place, or he'd have my hide. I'm sure he would probably do a press release or something. Anyway, I'm told that the Indigenous Affairs Minister is working on the final draft of that protocol, and he'll have more information available forthwith.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Just on a little side note, we have met before on one of your travels up to our area. We met on the side of the road where there was a little bit of a substation going on there. You were doing a tour, and I believe that was one of the first and last times you were ever up in that area. But I'm just wondering, when the Indigenous Relations Minister talked about it being imminent, was very left with the impression that it was already across your desk within your department, and that was 2 years ago now. So I'm just, again, wondering where that's at within your department, not within the Indigenous Relations Department, because we're assured that on that level, that's already been passed along to your department. So I'm just wondering where that's at.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, well, I've answered the member's questions in process, so that's exciting. But let's talk about the East Side Road, since that's where we met. And let's remind the member of how helpful the previous NDP administration was or wasn't with respect to the construction of the road that we stood on the side of and talked on. Because while he's talking about that East Side Road, I think it's important to put some facts on the record. The fact is that the previous NDP administration took $500 million and threw it to Ernie Gilroy and Virtually no road got built, as the member knows. We're talking about maybe 50 miles of road, which is awfully expensive road. And he also knows better than most of the people in the Legislative Assembly that hardly any of the money got to First Nations either. So, you know, the Auditor General did a scathing report on this, which I encourage the members to read. It was, they want to read it. It's called Manitoba East Side Road Authority, Community Benefits and Aboriginal Engagement Strategy. It's put out by the Office of the Auditor General, June of 2016. It talks about a variety of topics. Now, the member is, you know, a member of the NDP, so I'm sure he would like to change things so that something like this never happens again. The Aboriginal engagement strategy was virtually non-existent. There were virtually no, according to the auditor, no comprehensive risk assessments that were made of risk. There were insufficient practices for ensuring that the East Side Road Authority met its obligations to First Nations. They were promised, and there were construction companies who were given significant sums of money to do mentoring and training, but there were no reports of mentoring or training being done. And if they were done, they were not recorded. The equipment maintenance program was not met. The pre-construction work payments that were made didn't include support for work completed. There were gaps in monitoring compliance, insufficient practices for ensuring compliance. In other words, a ton of money wasted. So I wanted to have a look at the road, and it was a pretty good road. I think the member would agree, but it was a pretty small, pretty expensive road, given the $500 million it took to get that highway to blood vein going. Also, there were a lot of untendered contracts for pre-construction work that were awarded but not monitored. Benefits to the community were supposed to be provided. However, the benefits under the engagement strategy represented approximately 35% of the overall road construction costs. The Auditor General looked at and assessed whether the East Side Road Authority, under Mr. Gilroy's so-called management, adequately managed the Aboriginal engagement strategy, and concluded that the strategy was not effective at assisting in adding training opportunities to Indigenous communities. On page 3, they talk about no formal mentoring plans whatsoever in place for any of the 4 divisions with mentoring responsibilities. Ezra actually recorded the number of individuals that were supposed to be trained, but didn't monitor and track whether the individuals trained eventually got a job. In other words, they were given money to provide training, but didn't determine if the training they provided resulted in an Indigenous man or woman getting a job. In other words, a ton of money wasted that could have been put to better use, I think, very likely directly into the hands of local chiefs and councils than was the case with the way this secondary giant infrastructure structure was set up to do exactly what we already have an infrastructure department in the government to do: duplication. So I'm out of time, but if the member would like more detail, I can certainly arrange to go into this in more detail with him.
The member for Kiwetanuk.
Just for a few points of clarity, it's not 50 miles of road, it's actually 120 kilometers of road, which has connected more than just the community of Bloodvein. It has connected also the community of Barons River. And it's combined over 3,000 residents. So for members opposite, including the Premier, to consistently call this a waste of money, and it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to say that any kind of investment into connectivity, health and well-being of First Nation citizens here in Manitoba is quote unquote a waste of money. on a regular basis is disrespectful, and it's a slap in the face to Indigenous communities. But to get back to exactly, since the Premier has now alluded to the investments or the lack of investments in all-weather roads, the pandemic has also highlighted the disconnect that a lot of First Nation communities in fact have to just everyday things that maybe people down south take for granted. So can the Premier then share with us exactly how he intends to invest in a better system, in a better road system that connects First Nation communities, whether it be all-weather road or whether it be an investment in winter roads, because we all know that with global warming that the winter road season is getting shorter and shorter. But a lot of those communities are still surviving on contracts that are, you know, anywhere from 3 to 5 years old, with no account for exactly the change in what's going on. So can the Premier talk about what him as the Premier and the leader of this government does intend to do to in fact increase that investment?
The Honorable First Minister.
I am sure that the member would understand that I am in no way, shape, or form meaning disrespect to him or any First Nations leader presently or formerly. When I quote from the Auditor General's report of the province of Manitoba in reference to the mismanagement of the East Side Road Authority and hundreds of millions of dollars they spent, arguing that there needs to be roads in the north is fine. Arguing that this money was well spent is a futile exercise given the facts. So I just encourage the member, it's not a disrespectful thing to understand and learn from the reports of an Auditor General. And that is what I'll quote from. Recommendation number 1. And this relates to Aboriginal engagement strategy, which I'm sure the member is concerned about, as am I. Measuring progress against targets. It's on page 10. Measuring progress, and I encourage members to read this report, and it'll educate, it certainly serve to educate us on how to better work on our infrastructure strategies and projects going forward to get better value for money, better tendering processes, more transparency. Okay? These contracts, a number of these contracts were not tendered at all. Many of them were never posted, and we can't get answers to questions about where the money went. The Auditor General says it's futile. Don't know. Can't get it. Everybody should be concerned about that. That money's gone now. We can't get it back. Can't get in a Marty McFly time machine, go back in time and figure this one out. So, you know, this is what the Auditor General says. Measuring progress against targets allows management to determine whether stated objectives are being achieved and whether any corrective action is needed. We all understand that. This process should take place on a continuous basis so management can respond to changing conditions. The strategies related to the East Side Road project are planned general action statements and are missing measurable objectives. In other words, they didn't know what they were after. Measurable objectives would enable Ezra to assess how well it is progressing and if any corrective action is required. Recommendation number 1. We recommend that Ezra set measurable objectives, including short and long-term targets. Okay, you know, should you, when you've thrown $500 million in the direction of something, have an Auditor General have to tell you to set measurable objectives on what you're doing with the money? This is embarrassing. And the people that were most disadvantaged by it live along the East Side Road project, because we could think of how many extra kilometers, the members corrected me, it's 62 miles then, how many extra miles of road we could have built, how many communities we could be connecting right now with the money that was thrown away here. And the member knows that. And he can read the report to remind him of that fact. There were risks identified, but there was no business process for risk management. What that means is that additional costs, additional expenses were incurred as a consequence of no prep. Documented risk assessments hadn't been developed. This is on page 11 of the report of the analysis. Ezra hired a public accounting firm to perform specific procedures in response to a disputed settlement with one community. The member may know the community. The accounting firm produced a report, including recommendations to mitigate certain risks related to the community benefit agreements. most of the recommendations have not been implemented. This is the Auditor General talking. In other words, recommendations around ensuring third-party documentation is included as backup for payments, tendering of subcontract agreements by community corporations, ESRA providing formal procedures for community corporations to follow to verify invoices before they're forwarded to ESRA for payment. ESRA staff told the Auditor General's office that they conducted a lessons learned exercise for tendered construction projects to reduce risks on future contracts. However, they do not do this for community benefit agreement contracts. Well, why does that matter? Because that's where hundreds of millions of dollars is going into community benefit agreements, most of whom didn't involve the community, most of whom didn't benefit the community, and most of which weren't agreements. So, you know, I'm telling the member, and I'm not trying to cry with spilt milk here. This thing's done. It's over. The money went out and the results weren't achieved. But the reality is we've learned from this report. We've read this analysis. We've learned from the Auditor General's study, and we're doing, I think, a focused, better job on getting value for money.
The Honourable First Minister's time has expired. The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Well, that provides then a good segue. The Premier likes to throw shade on items that were before his tenure, in particular in his case, the East Side Road project. So let's talk about something that is now during his tenure and before his desk right now, the Channel Project. And in particular with the Aboriginal engagement strategy that he touted being a champion of and wanting to promote. So a few questions with that. One is, how much has currently been spent to date on the Lake St. Martin project?
The Honourable First Minister.
I'll dig that detail up on that. I don't want to give the member an approximate. I know that I've seen a document not that long ago that has an outline of the expenditures. So I will undertake, if I can't do it today, I'll undertake to, wait. I'll undertake to get that for the member. But I do want to say, when he talks about throwing shade, look, the shady thing that happened here, you'll have to talk to Ernie Gilroy about. The shady thing here is the Auditor General's analysis shows that there were all kinds of examples where improvements could have been made to get value for money. That value for money benefit would have accrued to principally to First Nations communities, individuals and people who live in First Nations communities along the side of the east side where a bipole line should have been built but wasn't, which would have assisted and would have made eminent good sense, wouldn't it? To have had the bipole line as recommended to Manitoba Hydro by senior advisors built on the east side of Lake Winnipeg through these very communities. And the NDP administration said, and we have to learn from these things and we have to examine them so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So when the member says, I like to throw shade, I like to learn from my own mistakes and I like to learn from the mistakes of others so I don't make them. And I think it's important to understand the previous NDP administration pushed the bipole line out to the west side away from the very communities that he has great concerns about, as do I. At the same time, they threw money at this, at the East Side Road project, willy-nilly without determining value propositions. And that is what the Auditor General of the province is saying. So if he's wanting to decry my willingness to learn from the Auditor General, I guess he's just done it. But the fact remains, I'm interested in making sure these kinds of mistakes don't happen again, because there's a lot of communities would have benefited from that $500 million and they didn't. And that's a shame. And I would think the member would share my concern about that. As far as the this capacity building allowance stuff, I talked to, and our department has examined when we were looking at how to make sure we could continue to get value from our infrastructure organization. And we wound down the East Side Road organization. we couldn't get answers to fundamental questions about where the money went from the people who were involved in handing it out. And that's what the Auditor General is examining here. And that's in part why the Auditor General went into this detailed study, to see if we could learn from it and make sure it didn't happen again.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
In 2018, with the channel project, it was announced that it was as a $540 million project, of which 247.5 federal, 247.5 provincial, plus an additional 45 million provincial. Are those still the terms? And what is still, and is this still the projected cost of the project?
The Honorable First Minister.
I'm not sure what project the member just referred to there with those numbers. If you wouldn't mind just clarifying for me, I'd appreciate it.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
The Lake St. Martin project.
The Honorable First Minister.
I believe I just undertook to get the detailed numbers for the member on the Lake St. Martin project. I can just undertake to do that again as a reminder.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
So this item has been on the books as an expense for many years without any action. So when can we expect some movement?
The Honorable First Minister.
Well, you know, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure that the member is talking about the same thing I'm thinking he's talking about. So I'll just say, if he's talking about building an outlet out of Lake Manitoba so we can get water management tactics in place so we don't ever do to Lake St. Martin or any other community in that area what happened back a few years ago, if that's what he's talking about, the number one reason that project commitment is still on the books and we aren't digging a ditch is because we can't seem to get everybody to the table and satisfy the federal government's consultation requirements, which seem to be added to on a regular basis, almost weekly. So we have reached out to every community in the area, and I can say with confidence that every community is now engaged in the consultation process. This is 5 years in, except the MMF I don't think is. They're not returning calls. So I would like to see the communities of that area, and I hope the member agrees with this, taken out of peril in the event of future flood circumstances ASAP. And I would like to see the non-Indigenous and Métis residents of that region also get their lives back. But they've been held hostage by the vagaries of nature to a great degree, and also by the management of mankind. In the 1950s, Premier Douglas Campbell, who would have served at that time, and been in this room presiding over a cabinet, was given recommendations following a flood situation to enact flood protection strategies. And just very quickly to go through them, part of that was to build what we now know as Duff's Ditch. The second part was to build a reservoir upstream, which ended up becoming the Shellmouth Reservoir. A third part, to dig an outlet at the Portage la Prairie Assiniboine Junction to move water into Lake Manitoba to alleviate pressure on downward communities and the city of Winnipeg. And there were other aspects to it, but those were the major aspects recommended to Premier Douglas Campbell, 1950s. Everything was done with the exception of the outlet that was recommended in the report to him that would go out the north end of the lake. You would think on a flat bottom, shallow lake like Lake Manitoba, people would understand you can't dump a bunch of water in one end and not be able to take more water out the other end. If you can't do that, you're imperiling everybody who lives in that basin. That's what happened. It was put on display a few years ago, as we all know. $2 billion later, we've got rebuilt communities in the north with the people disassociated from their own traditional lives, from their families, connections in that region, now going back into new communities, rebuilt at tremendous expense, human suffering, fiscal expense, amazing, almost unparalleled. And now we're set to do it again, and we're not careful. If we don't get this outlet constructed, the same circumstances could rear their head. Some say we're in a dry cycle right now. It isn't a problem. That isn't, look, you don't build flood protection just when it rains. It's a little late. The fact of the matter is we need to get at this project, and we've been really pushing hard, and we've had some good support from First Nations leadership, and we've had some who have been convinced, for whatever reason, Bay Street lawyer maybe, that they can do better by delaying. You know, I just think it's time to get at it. I think it would be in the best interests of all Manitobans, whatever. There's lots of people in the city of Winnipeg here that understand. People in the members' riding have been sacrificed to them for a long time, and they deserve to get protection. And we're prepared and committed to make that investment. It would be one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the history of the province, and I think one of the most overdue infrastructure projects in the history of the province as well. We have yet to get solid confirmation from the Prime Minister on the financial side. We've been asking for those agreements to be signed. Our consultation work continues. It's incredible the amount of work that has to be gone to dig a ditch.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
The First Minister had used the term reached out, and when he was referencing consultation, reaching out to various First Nation communities, with the exception of MMF, I might add, which he clearly specified. I was just wondering if the First Minister can then clarify exactly what is meant by reaching out in terms of consultation. How was that done, in what form, and with which communities?
The Honorable First Minister.
I'll undertake, I can give the member even more detail than I'm going to share with him right now. But this is a summary. I don't see a date on this document. And so I can't be assured that this is the up to the minute number. So I'll undertake for the member from the area formerly known as Rupert's Land to make available to him the updated number. I can only tell him this, that the formal consultation
I would
process.
like to interrupt the First Minister for a second to refer to members by their current constituency. The Honorable First Minister.
Yeah, the member for Kiiwetinoong, formerly known as Rupert's Land, that the consultation update that I'm about to give him may not be current as of this week. And so I can only share with him, because I don't have a date on this document, I can't share with him what the actual current number is. But I think this will tell him a lot. First of all, on the financial side, expenditures to date. We still anticipate a project in the area of total cost $540 million. Costs to date, including things like engagement consultation, environmental assessments, engineering and design, land acquisition, access road construction, internal administrative costs, total thus far as of the end of February. And again, I apologize to the member that this is I can get him newer information, but that's as of the end of February, over $70 million expended on the project. Again, I think this is as of the end of February as well. 139 meetings with Indigenous communities and groups. And this is, when I say Indigenous communities, so far we've directly communicated with departmental officials in infrastructure, have communicated with almost 40 different Indigenous communities and groups potentially impacted by the lake, not just Lake St. Martin, of course, because as a member knows, there are two outlets, Lake Manitoba outlet, then Lake St. Martin outlet. This includes 139 meetings with Indigenous communities and groups, 1,083 records of communication. That could be phone calls, emails, letters with Indigenous communities and groups. We have signed consultation work plans and funding agreements with all except
Order, please. The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise.